March 24, 2015. A routine flight from Barcelona to Düsseldorf becomes a nightmare at 38,000 feet. The captain leaves the cockpit for a bathroom break. When he tries to get back in, the door won't open. He knocks nothing. He knocks harder. Still nothing. Then he starts pounding on the door, shouting to be let in. Inside, his co-pilot sits silently at the controls, breathing steadily, saying nothing. 8 minutes later, 150 people are dead. This isn't a hijacking. This isn't a mechanical failure. This is something far more disturbing. So what really happened in those final minutes? Keep watching and find out. The Airbus A320 is one of the safest aircraft ever built. Over 10,000 of them flying around right now, carrying millions of passengers every year. These things are designed with redundancy on top of redundancy. If one system fails, 3 backups kick in. Joined Lufthansa's flight school at 20. Got his commercial pilot's license. By all accounts, he was living his dream. His colleagues described him as friendly, competent, professional. Nothing stood out. Nothing raised red flags. Almost nothing. But we'll get to that later. Because first, we need to understand just how secure modern cockpits are, and why that security became a death trap. September 11th, 2001 changed aviation forever. Before that day, cockpit doors were basically regular doors. Hollow core, simple locks. If hijackers wanted in, they were getting in. After 9/11 events, everything changed. New regulations required reinforced cockpit doors on all commercial aircraft. We're not talking about your bedroom door here. These things are built like bank vaults. Kevlar reinforced, bullet resistant, designed to withstand axes, crowbars, even small explosives. And they lock from the inside. The whole point was to make sure that once that door is closed, nobody gets through unless the pilots want them to. Sounds like a great safety feature, right? It is. Until the threat isn't outside the cockpit. Until it's already inside. The morning of March 24th starts normally. Flight 9525 is scheduled to leave Barcelona at 10:01 a.m. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer arrives for his pre-flight checks. 34 years old. Experienced. Over 6,000 flight hours. They'd never flown together before, but that's not unusual. Sondenheimer doesn't know Lubitz well, doesn't know his history, doesn't know what's about to happen. He runs through the standard checklist. Weather looks good. Aircraft is fueled and ready. Everything's routine. Just another Tuesday morning flight. Except it isn't. The plane pushes back from the gate on time. 144 passengers. Most of them German tourists returning from a Spanish holiday. 2 babies on board. 16 students from a high school in Haltern, traveling with their teachers. They're excited, chatting, taking pictures. They have no idea these are their last moments on the ground. At 10:01 a.m., local time, Flight 9525 takes off. Air traffic control hands them off from Barcelona to Marseille as they cross into French airspace. Everything is textbook. At 10:27 a.m., they reach their cruising altitude, 38,000 feet. Sondenheimer and Lubitz exchange some small talk. Air said his head looks clear. Should be in Düsseldorf in about an hour. Standard stuff. Then, at 10:29 a.m., Sondenheimer mentions he needs to use the bathroom. Happens on every flight. Pilots take turns leaving the cockpit for breaks. Nothing unusual about it. He unbuckles, stands up, tells Lubitz he's stepping out for a moment. The cockpit door closes behind him with a heavy thunk. That signature sound of a secure, reinforced door locking into place. The sound of safety. In 2 minutes, it'll be the sound of a death sentence. Here's what most people don't understand about those cockpit doors. There's actually a 3-way lock system. From inside the cockpit, the pilot can select normal mode, which lets cabin crew unlock the door with a code. There's also a fully locked mode, which overrides everything. Nobody gets in, period. And there's an unlock mode, which opens the door immediately. The system is designed so that if a pilot becomes incapacitated, the cabin crew can enter a code, wait 5 seconds, and the door unlocks automatically, unless the pilot inside manually overrides it by selecting the locked position, in which case, the door stays sealed for 5 full minutes. No matter what, no override, no emergency bypass. 5 minutes of absolute, impenetrable security. Andreas Lubitz knows this. And at 10:30 a.m., he reaches over and selects the lock position. Then he does something that air traffic controllers will later describe as methodical, calm, and absolutely terrifying. He enters new coordinates into the autopilot. The descent selector, which had been set to maintain 38,000 feet, is changed. The new altitude? 100 feet. Basically ground level. The plane begins to descend. At 10:30 and 53 seconds, the first alarm sounds in Marseille air traffic control. Flight 9525's altitude is dropping. Not rapidly, not a nosedive, but a steady, controlled descent. The controller radios the plane. No response. He tries again. Nothing. This is weird, but not panic-inducing yet. Sometimes radios malfunction. Sometimes pilots get busy and miss a call. He'll try again in a moment. Meanwhile, at 10:32, Captain Sondenheimer returns to the cockpit door. He presses the buzzer. In the cockpit, a chime sounds. On the door panel, a video screen shows Sondenheimer's face. Standard protocol. The pilot inside can see who's requesting entry. Lubitz doesn't respond. Doesn't press the button to unlock the door. Doesn't say a word. He just sits there breathing normally, adjusting the autopilot to maintain the descent. Still nothing. Now he's confused. Maybe Lubitz didn't hear it? Maybe he's dealing with something? He presses it a third time. By now, anyone in the cockpit would have responded. This isn't normal. This is wrong. At first, it's polite knocking. Hey, let me in. Not panicked. Inside the cockpit, Lubitz sits motionless. The knocking gets louder. Marseille air traffic control is now seriously concerned. Flight 9525 has descended to 30,000 feet and is still dropping. They've tried contacting the aircraft 7 times. No response. They alert other aircraft in the area. Something's wrong with 9525. By 10:35, Sondenheimer isn't knocking anymore. He's pounding. He's shouting. Open the door. Open the damn door. His voice is picked up on the cockpit voice recorder. You can hear the desperation, the confusion turning to fear, turning to horror. As he realizes what's happening, he tries the emergency code, types it in, waits for the unlock. 5 seconds pass. The door should open. It doesn't, because inside, Lubitz has overridden it. The lock holds for 5 minutes. He tries again. Same result. The door stays sealed. The passengers start to notice something's wrong. The plane is descending, but this doesn't feel like a normal descent. It's too steep, too fast. Some people are nervous. Others are starting to panic. You can hear it on the cockpit voice recorder. Distant screams getting louder, getting closer. Someone's yelling in German. The altitude warnings are blaring in the cabin. Overhead bins are rattling. Flight attendants are trying to reassure passengers, but their voices are shaking, because they know this isn't right either. And they can hear their captain on the other side of that door, screaming to be let in. At 10:37, Sondenheimer is using everything he can find to try to break through. There's speculation he tried using a crowbar from an emergency axe compartment. He's ramming the door with his shoulder. The door doesn't budge. Because it's designed not to budge, it's designed to withstand this exact kind of assault. The security feature that was supposed to save lives is now ensuring they all die. Air traffic control has scrambled French fighter jets. They'll reach flight 9525 in minutes. But what are they supposed to do? Shoot it down? There are 150 people on board. The jets arrive and pull alongside the Airbus. The pilots look into the cockpit windows. They can see Lubitz, sitting calmly, hands on the controls, staring straight ahead, not responding to radio calls, not acknowledging the fighters, just breathing steadily and flying the plane into the ground. At 10:38, the terrain warning system activates. A robotic voice fills the cockpit. Pull up, pull up, pull up. It's loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. Lubitz doesn't react, doesn't flinch. The mountains are rushing up to meet them. Flight 9525 is now at 9,000 feet and still descending. The French Alps fill the windscreen. Jagged peaks, snow-covered ridges. No airports nearby, no flat ground. Nowhere to go even if Lubitz wanted to abort. which he doesn't. The last sound on the cockpit voice recorder is the captain. Still pounding, still screaming. Then the screams of passengers who now understand they're about to die. Then impact. At 10:41 a.m., Germanwings Flight 9525 hits a mountainside near Prades Haut-Bléon in the French Alps, at approximately 1 and in the French Alps at approximately 430 miles per hour. The plane disintegrates instantly. There's no fire, no explosion, just the sound of metal tearing itself apart against rock. The debris field spreads across a remote, nearly inaccessible mountain slope. The largest piece of wreckage is about the size of a car. Most fragments are smaller than your hand. 150 people gone in an instant. Every single person on board, including Andreas Lubitz, who never said a word during the entire descent, who never wavered from his plan, who sat in that cockpit for 8.5 minutes, listening to his captain beg to be let in, listening to the passengers scream, and calmly flew them all into a mountain. So why? What makes a 27-year-old pilot with everything to live for decide to commit mass murder? Here's where the story gets even darker. Because Andreas Lubitz wasn't some random monster. He was a person. A person with a history that a lot of people missed or ignored. Remember earlier when I said his colleagues described him as friendly and professional? But there were warning signs. Big ones. Lubitz had been flagged for psychological issues. He'd taken a months-long break from flight school. The reason? Depression and anxiety. He'd been seeing mental health professionals. He'd been on medication. Lufthansa knew this. They knew he'd struggled, but he'd been cleared to fly. Doctors signed off. Therapists gave the green light. He passed all the evaluations. Except he wasn't. Not just one or two, multiple. He was doctor shopping. Going to different physicians, telling different stories, trying to get different diagnoses. Some of these doctors became concerned. Very concerned. Another recommended psychiatric hospitalization. One doctor found evidence Lubitz was having thoughts of harming himself. Several issued medical certificates declaring him unfit to work. Here's the thing though. Lubitz never told Lufthansa about any of this. German medical privacy laws meant doctors couldn't inform the airline without his permission. And he never gave it. Instead, he took the medical certificates. The ones saying he couldn't fly. And he hid them. Investigators later found them torn up in his apartment. He was supposed to be grounded. He flew anyway. On the day of the crash, Lubitz had visited a doctor just days before. The doctor had determined he was unfit to fly and issued another certificate. Lubitz ignored it. Got up that morning, put on his uniform, showed up for work like everything was fine. Nobody at Lufthansa knew. Nobody at Germanwings knew. Captain Sondenheimer didn't know he was flying with someone who multiple doctors believed was a danger. And even if they had known, what could they do? Fire him for seeking medical help? That's exactly the problem. That's why this crash exposed one of aviation's most dangerous secrets. Pilots are terrified to admit mental health problems. Absolutely terrified. Because in aviation, any hint of psychological issues can end your career. Permanently. Airlines can't risk putting someone with depression or anxiety or suicidal thoughts in control of a plane full of people. Makes sense, right? Except it creates a nightmare scenario. Pilots who are struggling have every incentive to hide it, to lie, to suffer in silence. Because admitting you need help means losing your job, your income, your identity, everything you've worked for, everything you've dreamed of since childhood. Lufthansa had policies. Mental health resources, support systems. But what pilot is going to use them when using them means never flying again, so they don't. They pretend everything's fine. They doctor shop. They hide medical certificates. They show up to work and hope nobody notices. Someone like Andreas Lubitz decides that if his life is over, he's taking everyone with him. After the crash, investigators pieced together what they could. The cockpit voice recorder was recovered. It survived the impact. Every sound from that final descent was recorded. The knocking, the pounding, the screams, Lubitz's steady breathing. The European Aviation Safety Agency listened to it and released a statement. The co-pilot's actions were deliberate. There was no malfunction, no emergency, no reason for the descent except the one nobody wanted to believe. This was murder-suicide. Plain and simple. The victims' families were devastated, not just by the loss, but by how preventable it was. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This wasn't bad luck. This was a person making a choice. A choice that killed 149 innocent people who'd done nothing wrong except get on a plane. Germany went into mourning. The town of Haltern am See lost 16 students and 2 teachers. An entire generation of one high school. Gone. Spain mourned too. Many passengers were Spanish citizens. France, where the plane went down, opened an investigation. Everyone wanted answers. And more importantly, how to make sure it never happens again. That's the question that haunts aviation to this day. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Those reinforced cockpit doors? They were supposed to prevent 9/11s from happening again. They worked exactly as designed. But they created a new vulnerability. They gave pilots absolute control with no oversight, no checks and balances. If a pilot wants to crash a plane, really wants to, there's almost nothing anyone can do to stop them. You can't break through the door. You can't override the controls from outside. You can't radio in and take command. The person in that cockpit has total complete authority over 150 lives. And we just have to trust they won't abuse it. After Germanwings 9525, aviation authorities worldwide scrambled to fix the problem. New rules were implemented immediately. In the US, Europe, and most major aviation markets, there's now a 2-person rule. At no point can one pilot be alone in the cockpit. If the captain steps out, a flight attendant steps in. It's not perfect. A flight attendant can't fly the plane. But they can unlock the door. They can call for help. They're a witness. It's something. Airlines also enhanced mental health screening, more frequent evaluations, better monitoring, more resources for pilots struggling with depression or anxiety. But there's still that fundamental problem. Pilots still have every reason to hide mental health issues. The stigma hasn't gone away. The career consequences haven't changed. So the question remains, how many pilots are out there right now, suffering in silence, too scared to ask for help? How many are one bad day away from making the same choice Lubitz made? Nobody wants to think about this. We want to believe pilots are stable, rational, trustworthy, and the vast majority are. Millions of flights take off every year. Billions of passengers fly safely. Incidents like Germanwings 9525 are extremely rare, but they happen. And when they do, the consequences are catastrophic. Because unlike almost any other profession, when a pilot fails, when a pilot breaks, when a pilot decides they've had enough, they have the power to take hundreds of people with them. And all the safety features in the world can't stop someone who's determined to die, and doesn't care who else dies too. That's what makes this crash so disturbing. It wasn't a failure of technology. It was a failure of humanity. A failure to recognize suffering. A failure to create systems where people can ask for help without destroying their lives. A failure to understand that sometimes the greatest threat isn't outside the cockpit. It's already inside. The wreckage of Flight 9525 was scattered across a remote alpine mountainside. Recovery teams spent months collecting fragments, identifying remains. It was grueling, heartbreaking work. Many families never got to bury their loved ones properly. There simply wasn't enough left to recover. Andreas Lubitz's family issued a statement expressing condolences. They insisted he wasn't a monster, that he was sick, that he needed help he didn't get. Maybe that's true. Maybe he was sick. Maybe the system failed him too. But that doesn't change what he did. That doesn't bring back the 149 people who died, because one man decided his pain justified their deaths. The memorial stands today in Lavernec, France, near the crash site. Families visit. They leave flowers, photos, notes. They remember, because that's all they can do. Remember the lives that were lost, and hope that their deaths meant something. That changes were made, that it won't happen again. But will it? Can we ever truly prevent someone determined to die from taking others with them? The uncomfortable answer is maybe not. Maybe the best we can do is minimize the risk. Screen better. Support better. Watch for warning signs. Create cultures where asking for help doesn't mean career suicide. But we can't eliminate the risk entirely, because at the end of the day, we're putting our lives in the hands of other humans. And humans are complicated, messy, unpredictable. That's fine. Most pilots are heroes who get us safely from point A to point B day after day. But sometimes, rarely, terrifyingly, we get an Andreas Lubitz. Someone who slips through the cracks. Someone who hides their pain until it's too late. Someone who decides that if they're going down, everyone's coming with them. And on March 24, 2015, 149 people paid the price for that decision. They boarded a routine flight home. They never arrived, because one man locked the cockpit door and refused to open it. 8.5 minutes later, they were all dead. That's the reality of Germanwings Flight 9525. Not a mechanical failure, not terrorism, not an accident. Just one human being making an unforgivable choice. And a reinforced door that made sure nobody could stop him.